Hi everybody, this is Otto Lee, and today we're very honored to have a good friend of ours, Gilbert Wong, here. Gilbert is a current trustee on the Futo Dianza College District and also a former mayor of City of Cupertino. And he's a good friend of ours and very thankful for his being here today. Good morning, Gilbert. How are you today?
I'm great, Otto. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for wearing the mask, but since we are social distance, we can go ahead and take it off.
Okay.
And chat. So Gilbert, I know you are of Chinese descent as well, and your family was from Hong Kong. Tell me more about your story, actually.
My father was born in Canton Province, and he left China to the Portuguese colony of Macau, and then from Macau he went to Hong Kong to work, which at that time was a British Crown colony. And then from there he immigrated.
Oh, you mean Macau, the Portuguese colony?
Yeah, the Portuguese colony,
right.
And then went over to British Hong Kong,
right.
And then he immigrated to the United States in 1956. He settled with my great aunt in Oakland, Chinatown, and I think that was a really good start for him to be in a Chinese community on the other side of the big city, San Francisco. He had a great choice of either going to San Jose, California, or to Sacramento, and I'm so glad that he chose Silicon Valley in the heart of delight instead of going to Sacramento, or I'll be a Valley boy. Nothing against Sacramento, but I love being in San Jose, and so happy to be in Silicon Valley.
So his choice was back then it wasn't Silicon Valley. It was, as you said, the Valley of Heart's Delight.
Correct.
Versus the Central Valley.
Correct.
Interesting.
And then from there, he came with no money in his pocket, and he started to work for Dick's Supermarket on
Dick's, yes.
4th Street in San Jose. And he went back to Hong Kong to marry my mother in 1966. And at that time, the communists came to China in 1949. My father wanted to get out prior to that. And he wanted to go back to Hong Kong and marry a Chinese American woman, so I'm very glad that he found my mother. Either way, I would have been born in the free world, maybe in Hong Kong or in the United States, and it's really sad to see what's going on in Hong Kong, where my mother and my relatives are from, because Hong Kong is a former British colony, and in 1984, British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping passed the Sino Joint Treaty that has the one country, two system, where Hong Kong will be reverted back to China in 1997 after a 99-year lease that the British got in the unequal wars of the Opium War. And then the Hong Kong people were really scared that what will happen to the window of the world, as it is one of the truest Western laissez-faire territory, colony in the world. And they're guaranteed of Western democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and there was a lot of uncertainty. But when Margaret Thatcher and Deng Xiaoping passed the 1984 Joint Declaration, it was great. There was a lot of uncertainty. I was there in Hong Kong on June 30th, 1997 to watch the handover.
Oh, you were there?
Yeah, I was there.
Wow.
It's really exciting.
The fireworks, and it was a rainy day too on July 1st when it happened, I heard.
Exactly. And I think the expatriate and the British community were really excited, but a lot of my Hong Kong friends it's a day off, they can go play tennis, and they weren't really celebrating, but really indifferent to the whole situation. And as we saw the first 10 to 20 years, everything has been pretty quiet. But since the Chinese government in Beijing decided to pass the National Security Act on July 1st, things turned upside down, and they were reacting to the protests for the past 12 months. Everybody knows that Hong Kong is part of the People's Republic of China. They just wanted to coexist with the Beijing government. They want to be autonomous. They want to elect their own chief executive. They're already electing their own legislative council called LegCo, with different constituency groups from the different business groups. And everything's going fine, but I think that China is really scared of the Western democracy, and as China comes up with the policies of Deng Xiaoping economically doing very well, we notice that there has been a change of way things are doing with Xi Jinping with his administration, and then with the Trump administration going with the trade embargo, things are really messed up.
Yeah, that's a fascinating story, and then actually we have a lot of similarities. I was actually born in Hong Kong in 1967. There was the uprising as well in Hong Kong, and they call the riots. During the time of Cultural Revolution, a lot of the violence and things happening in China spilled over to Hong Kong as well. And I was born in a very tumultuous time, and eventually in 1982, when Margaret Thatcher was visiting China to negotiate the turnover of Hong Kong, and I remember she tripped on the staircase. Yeah. That's when our family have decided that it's time to leave and immigrated to the United States. Also for my sister's future, so that we have a better chance and opportunity in education as well, higher education. As we all know, getting to Hong Kong University is so difficult at the time, right? So instead to escape from the communists, we have decided to move to the People's Republic of Berkeley, which is interesting. In any case, I went to Berkeley High School and then Cal Berkeley and graduated with a degree in engineering and chemical and nuclear engineering, actually, before I joined the U.S. Navy. Was active duty for a couple of years and then came back to Bay Area to law school at UC Hastings. So it's interesting to have that similar background about our family story, how we got here. Initially, and you know, I also do have a chance to get back to Hong Kong relatively frequently because I did work my day job being a patent lawyer. Some of the clients that we have, a law firms we work with, is based in Hong Kong and in mainland China as well. And in Hong Kong, I would say I think it's right that the area regarding freedom of speech and assembly and all that has remained practically unchanged for the past 20 odd years. And in a way, it's almost a bit of a surprise for us because that's why we left Hong Kong so urgently, thinking that bad things would come sooner. But in that case, I think since '97, you know, I think the changes were much more subtle, and not until most recently, as you said, I guess the past couple of years when you start having the marches regarding the proposed law at the time was about the extradition of an individual in Hong Kong to China. So that was what gave rise to a lot of the protests that people are fearful of that. So instead of having those demands being met, the People's Republic of China government actually passed this national law that you mentioned that came into effect on July 1st, which is far more drastic than what was initially proposed.
Right.
In this case, they really have changed the idea of what this one country, two system has meant, that the freedom of speech or freedom of expression is seriously hampered. I remember one of the very popular newspaper, Apple Daily, the owner and the office has been raided by police with fair search warrants and that. So we could tell that the journalistic freedom and the freedom of speech is very curtailed. And one thing I always want to say is, as much as the countries would say that we have freedom, we have elections, the test I always look at, Gilbert, is a very simple one.
Right.
And that is, if you could stand in a public area and yell out the name of the leader of your country in a negative ways and criticize them, will you get arrested? If you will get arrested, I would say the amount of freedom of speech you have is very limited.
Right.
And then there was a funny story I was going to share with you, is when I was serving on the Sunnyvale City Council back in the mid-2000s, and as the mayor, there were times I made the comment of criticizing and outright, condemn the acts of then governor of California, and that would be Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example, or the president of the United States, which would be George W. Bush at the time. If you remember, we went to Iraq and the war.
Right.
And I remember making those statements, and there were some delegations that visited us from China, and I think they were in shock to hear that I was criticizing the leader of our country so openly.
Right.
And they basically said, well, that's not possible in China.
Right.
That's something that is just not allowed.
Right.
Because partly the system is different, right?
Right.
It's a very top-down type of system.
Right.
Right. The provincial governors are appointed by the central government,
Right.
and the mayors are appointed by the governors, and et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
I mean, there are elections on a more local level.
Right.
But for us here, the level of government is very separate. City government is completely independent of
Right.
the state government, is completely independent from the federal government of how we're elected, number one. Number two is there's really no prohibition. As a matter of fact, outside the White House, every day you will see people with signs protesting
Right.
against the president, whoever the president is.
Exactly.
So I think that is the one of the big differences. We can see what freedom of speech and freedom of expression is. And I would say, it's also quite sad to see that our country, United States here, has reverted back.
Right.
What I mean by that is when the Trump wants to move from point A to point B,
Right.
he used the National Guard, he used the troops
Right.
to clear out a square of peaceful protesters,
Right.
and using tear gas
Right.
and forces, which I thought was completely uncalled for, and which is really unlike what our freedom of press and freedom of speech normally guarantees, and freedom of assembly that guarantees our citizens.
Right. And I think a lot of the international students from China understand that what a Western liberal democracy is in the United States and is in Hong Kong. They can see that how a diverse, multicultural place to live like Hong Kong or Silicon Valley is. And I think that they really like what we have here. But they also love their country, and their country is a communist totalitarian regime. And I think that it's very important that not only we educate the international students who are here, but also hope that they can bring the economic prosperity that they have back home, and also, help reform the government to be more of a liberal democratic country, which will take over time. We're not advocating for a change of government, but a reform, because as you can see, during the emperor system, most of the people were living very poor, and a strong emperor system really kept the people intact because they were poor and uneducated. Then when Dr. Sun Yat-sen, which I think both the communists and the Kuomintang agreed to, that is the father of modern China, overthrew the last emperor, that there was a movement of democracy. And warlords came in, and the communists and the Kuomintang were fighting all the way up to 1949. The Communist Party
The
won.
Second World War too, of course.
Exactly.
Right?
And then they ran over to Taiwan and caused havoc. But now there is a free multi-party system between the Kuomintang and the Green Party, almost to the point that they want to declare independence. But that is an issue that Taiwan, the Republic of China, has to deal with the mainland China, with the PRC. But also Hong Kong should have its rights, and the people should elect their own leaders. They have been for many, many, many decades, both under the British and the Chinese, to have freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, a free court system. Hong Kong is a financial capital of the Far East, and now with the uncertainty of the implementation of the security law, that people are now leaving in droves, because business multicultural does not want uncertainty. They want a stable government that is a mixture of a British colonial court system and a rule of law that is Western, not Chinese, not going to be dictated by the Beijing government. And Hong Kong people, like you and my wife, they just want to be left alone and run a successful business and have a future for their children. And that's why your parents and my parents immigrated here to California. In Cantonese we call it, the Golden State, or Gamsan, the Golden Mountain, because there's so much opportunity and prosperity here that I, as an American-born Chinese, feel it's my obligation to help spread, and fight for certain rights, De Anza College had an opportunity through the Hong Kong Student Association last year. Hyman Wong, through the Hong Kong Student Association, invited Charles Mok and Alvin Yuan to come and speak about the current events in Hong Kong, and I was really inspired by their speech. I wish this movement could have happened before 1997, but at that time, the British didn't really give them an opportunity. They just traded one colonizer with another colonizer, and China left them alone. And the Hong Kong has a very unique identity, and also each of the Chinese provinces and each of the minority autonomous regions like Tibet and Xinjiang and Inner Mongolia also has their identity. But slowly the Communist Party in the Beijing government is slowly stamping out those rights of the Uyghurs, of the Tibetans, of the Mongolians, of the Catholics, the Muslims. And I think that if you're going to be a modern communist country, that you also have to evolve as well too, and I don't see Xi Jinping doing that. Now, unfortunately, our government with Mr. Trump has also gone backward as well too, and I think that at least we can have constructive criticism, like you said, that our Chinese counterpart sees that we have constructive criticism, and that's something that we lack here. And I think it starts all at the local level, at the supervisor level, at the city council and school district level.
Well, I think one big difference too is regarding the elections that we have.
Right.
There's no question that President Xi Jinping will be in office probably for life.
Right.
It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Right.
Until he passes away, he decides to retire himself, he will be leading China based on the system.
Right.
Versus the system here in the United States. By November this year, there will be an election, and
Right.
after the election, and as of today, right now, Mr. Trump probably will not be the president, if you believe where the polls are going.
Right.
And
Or
this is
electoral
the-
college, he might be a president.
Right, he may still be, but my thing is there's uncertainty. There's
Right.
no, it is clearly nobody could say they're certain that Trump
Right.
will be for president, at least
Right.
for another 4 years. And then and even if he's president for another 4 years, if he were reelected, we know that that will be the end of his presidency.
I hope so.
Because of the way our constitution having the term limit of the 2 term of the president. I think that is something that is quite different. So it is, I think you nail on the head where the characteristic why Hong Kong is so special as a city, as you recall, is the fact that it was the gateway to get into mainland China
Correct.
for many decades.
Correct.
After 1949, China was basically closed off for quite a while
Right.
To the Western world,
Right.
and really didn't really widely open until 1979, when President Jimmy Carter, and this is after, of course, Richard Nixon in '72
Correct.
opened up the ping pong diplomacy, and when President Carter actually opened up the relationship, formalized it with People's Republic of China as the official China in the eyes of the United States and of course then the world as well, and the United Nations and all that.
And that's when we opened the embassy, Washington, D.C.
That's right.
And the consulate. And the reason why I remember that is that the summer of 1980, we went to the San Francisco Chinese consulate and applied visas.
Correct.
And we were one of the first Chinese families to go into China, and we got to visit my grandmother in August 1980. That was really special.
Right, that's right. And then the thing is, and the thing about Hong Kong is that because of being a British colony, it also has the British common law system,
Correct.
and the rule of law has been very well respected worldwide as a fair forum to adjudicate legal disputes. Something that the rule of law, instead of being ruled by law, is something that Hong Kong has that very unique position to have. In some ways also similar to Singapore as well, that also have a very similar legal systems, again also being a former colony of the UK, of the United Kingdom years ago. And I think the concern now of a lot of people is that has the rule of law of Hong Kong been now eroded after July 1st. And maybe arguably in area of commercial issues that it might not be, but again, with all the trade war or trade issues with the United States, with Huawei being labeled as negatively in the United States press as well and around the world and other Western countries, I think a lot of people in China, not only Chinese government, view that as the attack on the China.
Right.
And so I wonder if the rule of law or the ability to adjudicate commercial dispute would be affected politically. And so being based on the interpretation of the law as we have always enjoyed for all these years.
I think that with the national security law that was passed on July 1st, it may have ended the one country, two system. We're already seeing the effects of multinationals leaving Hong Kong for Singapore, Seoul, Tokyo, and I hope that things will be better in the future and hope for the best for Hong Kong.
Yes, and certainly we all hope for the best. And I think the erosion of these separate one country, two systems is something that we are very fearful of, and hope that the change is not going to be more extreme as we might suspect.
Exactly. Thank you, Otto, for having me here.
No, thank you for being here. Really appreciate, Gilbert, for your perspective on a very topical issue that affects millions of people in Hong Kong, and for those who is interested in understanding the problem of Hong Kong right now. So thank you very much for your time today.
You're very welcome, Otto.